Okay, so now we're doing our second video with the notorious, politically incorrect, venerable, and most holy Venerable Panavasa,
Oh, good.
Mahatera. As
Yeah.
yeah,
Hail Manu.
wonderful. Yeah, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And this time I really kind of want to get more into just maybe discussing what we believe about kind of the basic Buddhist principles or ideas, especially when it comes to karma or kama,
Mhm.
enlightenment, meditation, stuff like that, just to kind of get the basics down. Because I've always found that you have like a really interesting perspective on that most people don't. And so, if you're up for it, that's the plan.
Okay, good.
Awesome. So actually, I wanted to kind of start off because I was watching a lot of your videos after our last one. I kind of was just playing them always on the side when I was working, and there was
Okay.
one thing that I was kind of curious about. Okay, so I'll just kind of read like the question that I wrote. So it just says, so in one of the videos I watched, you said you're a conservative Buddhist because of your position on the Vinaya. However, you seem to also understand that the spiritual path is universal. Rules and observances aren't to be clung to, and that the monastic rules basically just are everything the Buddha commented on more or less, and then they made it into a rule. And then one more thing is that due to culture and less enlightened people, the teachings eventually become more and more corrupted. So with all that said, why do you take the Vinaya so seriously?
Well, it's the rules of the game. I mean, it's like a voluntary thing that you join. I mean, nobody's forcing you to become a Theravada Buddhist monk. And just being a Theravada Buddhist monk is defined by Vinaya.
Hmm.
It's like if you become a monk, it's through an act of Vinaya. And even if you drop out of being a monk, it's through an act of Vinaya. So
Hmm.
it's like the rules. And I just had this idea that if I was going to voluntarily join this group, I might as well follow the rules.
Hmm.
So that made me relatively conservative, at least with regard to orthopraxy. Even if I'm not orthodox, I'm orthoprax.
Hmm. Which means you practice as an Orthodox person more or less, even though you might not fully believe in it. Is that what the difference
Uh,
is?
yeah, well, orthodox means you've got the straight doctrine, whereas orthoprax is you've got the straight practice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I can be a heretic, just a damnable heretic with regard to some of my beliefs, but at least, like if somebody asks me about, what does Buddhism say about this or that, then sometimes I have to give two answers. It's like, well, the orthodox answer is this, but personally, I'm more inclined to follow that.
Hmm.
So, but with regard to following the rules, it's like especially a lot of monks, they just really don't consider it to be important, or some monks that are considered to be exemplary will just still fudge on the rules. Like Ajahn Tanisaro wrote a book on the Buddhist monastic code, where he's pretty much endorsing every loophole in the books. It's like a monk is allowed to own 3 robes. Any robe other than these 3 robes, any clothing beyond the 3 robes and a belt, you can keep for no more than 10 days, and then you have to get rid of it. And
Hmm.
then, it's like a lot of monks now, most monks nowadays, even though they're supposedly strict, they'll just call it accessory cloth. They won't even call it an extra robe. They'll just say, well, it's just extra cloth. And then they just treat it like an ordinary robe. And yeah, there's so many loopholes. There's like even a saying in Burmese, we need that, chet that, which means if you're skillful enough at Vinaya, you can kill a chicken. So
Hilarious.
yeah, you just know all the loopholes for avoiding the rules, which for me is just lame. I mean, if you're going to break the rules, you might as well at least take responsibility. Just yeah, I'm not following that rule, rather than say, well, the Thai Sangha Raja said it's okay or this or that. I mean, just if you're breaking the rule, you just fess up to it and admit that you're breaking it.
But a lot of them too are also kind of like outdated. Like it had to do with like scarcity. Like, isn't there something about like black wool, and it had to do with more of a scarcity issue and the value of the wool and this type of thing too, right? Where it's like, I mean, also too, I always wondered, like at the end of the Buddha's life, right? He basically said, well, all the rules that are, less important, you can disregard. I can't remember his exact words. You probably know it,
Yeah, yeah, the
but
lesser and minor rules.
yeah. So I mean, like so many of them seem like lesser and minor, pretty much except for like the precepts, and then the more intense, don't kill anyone type of rules. And I always wondered, like, is that really like what it should be now? Because obviously, especially like I was when I ordained, I was more in the Sri Lankan Sangha, and they have pretty open liberal view of the Vinaya or Vinaya or however you actually say it in reality. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it's you know, different people have different interpretations, and yeah, I freely admit that following the rules of monastic discipline strictly, especially outside of a Buddhist Asian country, is just really a colossal pain in the neck sometimes, just
Mhm.
because it's completely alien.
Well, it's so hard to
So
know how much too is like because of the culture of India. Like if the Buddha was in the U.S., would he
yeah,
really
yeah.
make rules? And that's like one question that I just find it so I don't know. Like if we're really after truth, how come no one's like the lack of debate around it, the fact that it's just this and to follow it just seems so inauthentically Buddhist to me in a way, even though I also did it, you know?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Um, well, I mean, theoretically, a great council could say, you know, they would have the authority to change the rules. You know, if there was like a seventh great council, but the monks that attend great councils are like conservative Asians that are afraid to change anything really, other than maybe a few punctuation marks or something like that in the texts. So um, it just, I mean, it's really an issue that is, I mean, there's certainly valid arguments on both sides. You can say that any religion that doesn't change and adapt to fit the culture is committing suicide, which in a way is true. But then you could also argue just as validly that any religious system that does change to fit the culture is committing suicide, just because, you know, you start off with an enlightened teaching and then people just start changing it to suit their own convenience or their own, you know, touchy feely sentiments or whatever, and
Mhm.
that messes it up too.
I mean, I get how
So
someone like myself who had just been a monk for a short time when, pretty much you just like obey the rules because you're a beginner. But like someone like yourself too, and this is the interesting thing about you is, I mean, because you are willing to go into the more politically incorrect areas. And I would say, like, it's someone that has as much time being a monk who follow the rules. I would think in your own personal life, right? Which is probably where you come to and why you speak and, talk about this stuff. You would have enough authority to say, okay, well, I tried this. Like, when is it? Because for me, it's like also too, like, when does it hit direct experience? If we're talking about learning through our own direct experience and like you did X, Y, Z, and this is how even kind of my argument around for drinking a lot of times, where it's like, okay, well, I've had one beer before and nothing's happened and there's an environment and it's like I would say a net positive and then this kind of absolutism with the drinking stuff where I could see how for some people that maybe don't have that they can become alcoholics or maybe it's just a pure negative and then this thing of like negating it almost to me like sometimes this is like the dogma of Buddhism where it's like eventually if you have followed the rules done it for a period of time experiment on the other side you know what that is like at what point can you think for yourself.
well, at any point you can think for yourself, although it seems to me that if you really don't want to follow the rules, I mean, you could just create your own system or join a different system or something like that.
Well, I mean,
And
I think you would claim though for some of it, right, that the Buddha, I mean, even my claim, right, if I did X, Y, Z thing, and my understanding would be, this is what Buddha would have done in like an American culture or something, right? So would still be like Buddhism because it's still aligned with the core understanding that I would have a Buddha, right, to some degree. I mean, I
yeah,
know.
but like if the Buddha were alive today, then there's a good chance monks wouldn't shave their head because you know they were just cutting off their social status. You know, they might have long hair and beards or something. They wouldn't be wearing robes. They'd be wearing, you know, gray sweats or just some really plain, uh, just really simple Western attire.
Go back to
And
nudist stuff where they can just go out and just be naked with the ashes, like in India.
yeah, I doubt that he'd have that. But yeah, it's really Theravada Buddhism is kind of up against a dilemma where really nobody has the authority to change it, and it's in a way it's good that it not change, even though it's archaic. I mean, a lot of the rules are just plain flat out archaic. A lot of the rules, I mean, you just don't have the opportunity to even break them anymore. Like how many monks are going to have an alms bowl made out of a human skull? It's against the rules, but I mean, nobody wants to do it nowadays anyway. Or,
Mhm.
you know, handing food, giving food to a naked ascetic or something like that. I mean, it just doesn't arise. Or the black goat wool thing that you were talking about. You know, it's just a non-issue really.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's like you can say that just adhering to the rules no matter what. You know, it's like clinging to morality and observances, silabata paramasa, which is a hindrance and all that. But
Hmm.
that's really a mental state, the clinging, you know, assuming that it's going to get you enlightened or something. But yeah,
Well, I find,
I assume it's just a choice that everybody has to make. But something about my temperament has me saying that if I'm going to voluntarily join this organization, I should follow the rules rather than just pick and choose. Although to some degree, I have fudged on rules. So there is that too.
I mean, that's one reason I really liked even the Sri Lankan Sangha, especially where I ordained, because they were so open with a lot of that stuff. Because I mean, that's the thing, you know, even when I went ordained, I basically wanted a place I could just practice and be supported. And that's the amazing thing for me about being a monk is the fact that you can basically, you know, just wear simple clothes, people give you food, and you can do what you want spiritually. You can go inside, you can meditate, you have time now. And to me, like that's the core of it, and that's what makes it so amazing that the fact that these all these lay people in Asia are willing to just, you know, say, hey, this guy wants to, you know, be a monastic and now you have the opportunity to practice. You know, that to me is like, I mean, I love that. That's the wonderful part about it, for sure.
Yeah. And then another aspect of just strictly following rules is that um, you know, in a way, it's sort of overcoming your own personal preferences. And monks really aren't supposed to
Mm.
have preferences anyway. Like the ideal monk has no preferences.
Yeah.
So you know, the Vinaya rules are just there. That you know, it's like you know, even the way you go to the bathroom is all you know regulated, sort of
Is it true
regimented
you
and
can't pee
everything.
standing up, right? Or something like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's all kinds of rules just about going to the bathroom. You know,
And
you're
that's
not.
just about like killing bugs, right? Like, I mean, from my understanding.
Um, that I think is the official reason, but also just having a monk hiking his robes up where other people can see what you
Oh,
know
yeah,
what he's made of. That
yeah.
that also I assume is one of the reasons.
Hmm. Okay. And so the next kind of topic I was thinking about talking about karma or karma. Um, you know, there's been a lot of people, you know, that I've talked to, and there seems to be just I'm surprised by how wide of a range there are of opinions on this. Because, you know, obviously the kind of basic definition is just action, and people like love to point that out, like karma just means action, but I mean, obviously it's also about past actions that flow into the present and that current actions are going to flow into the future if there's craving and attachment to them, which is going to generate this karma. So it's also too about like, you know, some sort of personal factor of karma. Then there's like different levels of karma, right? You would have like the world, the karma of maybe a world, the karma of a certain race, the karma of a certain location, of countries, I believe, has have a certain karma. Um, and then all this interplays, and you know, like the main thing was, you know, I remember someone else posted on something that I posted about can't remember. It was relating to Kama, one of my articles, and they were saying like, okay, well, if there is a tsunami like in Thailand or something that wipes out a bunch of people, to say that that was their Kama or karma is not correct. And I always thought, well, of course, everything that would happen to you would be your karma, and then also too, like a lot of this too is always juxtaposed with whether or not you should help, like the idea of karma. Whatever happens to you is your karma, so therefore I should be hands off. And if you're dying on the street, it's not my problem. And you know, I always thought that it kind of depends on your level of consciousness. So you're depending upon your level of personal development, there's going to be certain things that come up to your awareness, and you should, you know, choose in the best way possible because things are just way more complicated than help or not help, in my view. So I was just curious, especially with that Thailand example, whether, you know, if something happens to you and it's just horrible, can you just say that's their karma, and then how should you or help or not?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that. First of all, just because it literally means action doesn't mean that that's. I mean, just because the word itself, the etymology, means action, doesn't mean that that's exactly what karma is anymore. I mean, like the word understanding means standing under, but I mean that has nothing to do with that, the actual process of understanding something necessarily. So, I mean, like the belief in karma originally was something like action or even like ritual action. Like karma was like the priests had to do the specific ritual actions in order for the sacrifice to be efficacious. And then it evolved into something else. Like the Buddha was continually giving new meanings to old words.
Hmm.
So karma, from the Buddhist point of view, literally is cetana, or volition. So it is a mental state. It's like will, in like Schopenhauer's will, or just like the motive force of your mental states, like
Hmm.
the momentum of your mind is essentially what karma is from the Theravada Buddhist point of view.
Hmm.
With regard to the tsunami wiping out a whole group of people, first of all, from the Buddhist point of view, Orthodox Buddhism, there is no group karma. All karma is like individual, sort of like, it's sort of like the argument of like the Darwinian evolutionists, where there's no group evolution. It's always like individual survival of the fittest, and then that has just sort of like a overall seeming group effect, but it's not really an entire. There's all this debate and argument going on between like the biologists over how that works, but in Buddhism it's kind of similar, where it's ultimately all karma it's just each stream of karmic momentum of an individual, supposedly.
Hmm. And is that your personal position then too? Because I would think if you have a bunch of people with personal karma and they've all done similar things, that you would get this sort of like, momentum that would appear at least, even if you
Yeah,
broke it down into smaller factors as
yeah,
individual,
yeah,
as group, right?
certainly. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, if you're all raised in the same culture, you all belong to the same culture, you have like culturally conditioned attitudes, and you're going to make similar decisions and have relatively similar beliefs about things, then your karma can be running in parallel a lot. And if it's too different, then you're just going to diverge off, and next time you'll be reborn into a very different culture or some such.
Yeah. And so is it their individual karma then? If someone gets hit by something or something horrible happens to you, you could say, oh, that's their karma, right?
Yeah, you can say that's their karma, but that doesn't really justify any action on your or inaction on your own part. It's like if
Mhm.
if somebody punches you in the nose, then they could just argue, well, it's your karma to get punched in the nose, but they're creating new karma by punching you. So they're creating new unskillful or unwholesome karma by punching you, even though you're just paying off an old karmic debt while they're incurring a new karmic debt by doing it.
Yeah. So then the
And just
question kind of goes like, then how much should you get involved with all
um
the things? Like, I mean, there's a million and one things, right?
yeah, well, not to do anything is not necessarily bad. It's like neutral. Not to do anything is like karmically neutral. But
Mhm.
if you want to earn merit, you want to do good, then you do good.
Mhm.
Monks, technically, like a monk who's really going for enlightenment, he should be shooting for like ethical neutrality. He's supposed to leave good and bad behind.
Mhm.
So doing good deeds is for lay people.
Mhm.
And that's what I used to say to Burmese monks. They'll say, I didn't want to bow to the statue or something. And they'll say, oh, you get merit for bowing to the statue. And I'll just say, merit's for lay people.
That's
Because,
hilarious. I've never heard that before. I mean, the teacher that I followed was really big on doing good deeds and merit, but it was kind of like by leading by example. I always felt like it wasn't so much for him as, whatever he did, people would also kind of follow suit. And so just out of his love and caring for lay people, he kind of,
yeah.
did all
Or
that.
there's also just the ideal of like the Mahayanist bodhisattva, where you just do good all the time without identifying it as good. It's
Mhm.
just ordinary life for you. You're
Mhm.
not considering it to be good, but you just do good just as a way of life.
Well, wasn't there also a sutta, I think, where you talked about like the Buddha, and they were questioning like, why do you basically do all this stuff with teaching and helping people? And then he talked about something like how if he didn't do all this, then all the worlds would collapse because it's kind of like his, they all look to him or a way. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. I remember reading though something about that, something about the fact that the Buddha basically had to help all these people, or people looking to him would basically like it'd be like war and hell to pay on Earth almost.
Um, I don't know. If he didn't do it, then if it's the karma of the other inhabitants of the world for there to be a Buddha, then somebody else would step in and take the job, I assume.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really complicated, and the texts say that even just trying to understand the implications of karma can cause you to go insane, and it's just like an unthinkable thing. But the universe is just so infinite and so beyond the ability to figure it out that
Well, I always thought that was kind of like more on the like for any individual thing, like for even like a speck of dust to float through the air, the entire universe had to be what it was throughout all of time. So in that sense, like trying to figure out this or that, but I always felt like principles, right, could be understood. And maybe there, I mean, I would think there isn't infinite principles that relate to karma, that there would be like a certain set of principles, and that if you understood those principles correctly, you would at least have a theoretical understanding of karma. But do you think you can't even understand like that?
Well, I mean, the idea that karma is volition or chetana, like the will or urge, the momentum of your mental states. Yeah, that is pretty clear cut in the texts. So that much you can understand, but all of the ramifications and implications of exactly what kind of karma is going to result from this or that, or like the tsunami question, that kind of thing. It's you're getting into stuff you're getting into very deep waters there, just trying to understand all the implications. It's like even in physics, just trying to figure out like the interactions of three particles is, I mean, there's no way you can do it. I mean,
Hmm.
you can they've got tricks for sort of guesstimating exactly what the forces are going to be, but just having the three particles interacting simultaneously is just too complicated for human mathematics at the present time to really deal with it exactly.
Hmm.
So karma is kind of like that, when you've got all these different people's karma just sort of interacting, then and all just dovetailing perfectly, where everything that I want to say, you happen to have the karma to hear it, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. That you're getting into like very deep waters there, and it's very difficult to try and figure that kind of stuff out. So just sticking with the simple stuff, it's like if you create karma, it kind of helps, it keeps you in samsara, or helps to keep you in samsara. And if you do, if you do actions that reduce suffering, then that's good, and it gets you closer to sort of peace of mind, or just having a peaceful state. If you're doing lots of violent sort of karma that's just causing all kinds of chaos, then that's going to result in so much chaos in your own life that you're going to be so distracted by all the commotion going on, that it's going to essentially keep you stuck.
Hmm. Okay. And then so like the other thing with that kind of likes the karma, right, is then like reincarnation or rebirth. Because I remember like the monk, the Sri Lankan monk here, Bhante Wabalopiananda, who I spent a lot of time with. Um, he would correct me when I would ever say reincarnation. He's like, no, 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 it's rebirth because there's nothing incarnating. It's just this flow or whatever, right? And that's kind of like, from my understanding, more the Theravada Buddhist subtlety, between the reincarnation and rebirth. But
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like you got these people that are saying, no, it's not being, it's becoming, or that kind of thing. It's or it's not no self. It's just not self. But really, I
Mhm.
mean, it's not important. I mean, I use reincarnation sometimes, just giving
Yeah,
a new meaning, like Buddha was giving a new meaning to karma.
I mean, my understanding of kind of like of reincarnation or rebirth is that we do have subtle bodies, and these subtle bodies collect kind of certain information, and there are imprints, right? Like I don't know if in Buddhism even we I'm not sure if there's a thing like, is there like the Akashic records or the equivalent type of thing, or is it just kind of the Akashic records are supposed to be where everything's stored, so everything throughout all of time you've ever done is stored in these records in consciousness. I mean, with does that also, is there something with that with Buddhism? Because I kind of learned about that from the Hindu side. It kind of affected my beliefs around this issue. I'm not sure where you stand on that.
Yeah, the only thing I've ever heard about the Akashic records was Edgar Casey. That
Hmm.
he supposedly, when he was in a trance, he would consult the Akashic records, which is yeah, it's like every action leaves its trace, and you can sort of follow the footprints of these actions
Hmm.
to understand things. But yeah, I'm unaware of Theravada Buddhism having anything relating to that, other
Okay.
than the Buddha. I mean, technically, from the Theravadan point of view, the Buddha cannot see the future, even though he was making prophecies or predictions of the future. But he had such a comprehensive knowledge that he could just extrapolate
Hmm.
forwards into the future.
Yeah, I think with the Akashic records, from my understanding, it would just be past. I mean, I think also too, I might have heard about it in Theosophy, which kind of, um, made me think about it. But I don't know if you believe that there's any sort of, subtle body impressions, or we have subtle bodies, and how that might play into reincarnation and rebirth, or if that's just, I mean, I think from my understanding of Theravada Buddhism, there is no, I've never heard them talk about how that relates or how that phenomenon works in connection to subtle bodies. But I just thought I might ask you if your understanding kind of is related there, what you think about that.
There's very little mention about subtle bodies. I think maybe in the commentarial literature there's some sort of mention of it, but it's relatively obscure. It's not emphasized much, if at all, or in like orthodox Theravada.
Hmm.
Like with regard to like dreams, like I think the Hindus would say that you use your subtle body in the dream state. I'm not an authority on Hinduism, but then again, like the commentaries are almost silent on dreams or anything like that. They don't really believe in a bardo realm like the Tibetan Buddhists do, where in Theravada, it's like as soon as the stream of consciousness is cut off in this existence, it just immediately in the very next moment has to re-arise somewhere else. Sort of like pushing down a lump in the carpet just causes it to rise somewhere else simultaneously.
Hmm. I mean, because from my understanding with Theravada Buddhism, they believe that it's just a craving basically from the previous life, gives a push and then the next life starts. But then in Hinduism, it's kind of like you have this body. So it's like both positive and negative karmas are there stored in this subtle body. And, I mean, and then that would basically like come. So like even like meeting people that might help you, all this stuff would also be, something carried over from past lives. I don't know if what's your understanding of that?
Um, I'm not exactly sure what you're driving at in that. Although, I mean, it does remind me that, like in Theravada Buddhism, it does say every single thing that happens to you, everything that you experience is the fruition of past karma. So even hearing a teacher, I mean, you have to have the karma to hear it, otherwise you couldn't hear it. So like you're reading a Buddhist text for the first time or hearing an enlightened teacher for the first time, still you have to already have the karma. So you've already got that information like in potential form in like your subconscious mind or whatever. Otherwise you couldn't even hear it. So it's in a way it's kind of a paradox
I
where
guess what I'm asking too is like what flows over from lifetime to lifetime.
it would, well, it's like Schopenhauer's will essentially. It's just like the momentum of your mental states.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
that's essentially it. And it's like in a way, it's sort of like a flame where, so long as you've got like with regard to a fire, you have to have fuel, oxygen, and heat. And if you got those three together, then you've got fire. And just like the consciousness of a human being is similar, or just the human being in general is similar. So long as you've got the conditions supporting it, it's going to remain. And so you're trying to remove the conditions in order to leave samsara and attain nirvana.
Okay. I mean, the other thing that makes me think about is just like, because we touched on the subtle body thing, because, I mean, one thing that I studied quite a bit was also theosophy. And as you know, like, I mean, they kind of helped restart Buddhism in Sri Lanka after the British left and almost helped negotiate the government and a lot of this stuff. And they, kind of saw Theravada Buddhism as, lining up with their different beliefs of there being like, seven subtle bodies and this kind of higher self and lower self, and that there was also Pali words and like related to that. I'm not sure then, I mean, I'm also curious, like just besides just the Buddhist perspective, what your own belief about maybe subtle bodies are.
uh Subtle bodies, I really don't I don't assume their existence, just because Theravada Buddhism has essentially nothing to say about it. And so yeah, I assume there could be subtle bodies, but yeah, I don't really have it worked into my philosophy.
I guess for me, the reason why it's partly worked in is because I've had like out of body experience. I've had like, maybe really, I mean, really two ones that really stood out to me. One was on a Native American vision quest where I popped out of my body and I could see my body and the forest for like miles, and just everything was a part of me. And it was just like really radical experience that kind of made me, from that point on, I always just knew there was a, spiritual world or something beyond the materialistic world after that. And that was a big driving force after that. And the other one was when I basically was in doing my first Essen Goenka retreat, the Vipassana 10-day meditation retreats. And I ended up, I was doing like the body scanning, and then I went to sleep, and then there was like a bubble, and it was basically like this dream bubble. And then I realized I was dreaming, and I could see the dream in the bubble, and like was aware of it. It's almost like I thought it was the individual first, the identification, and it was with the bubble. And then I was able to like go outside the bubble and look around the rooms. I could see the room, see myself dreaming. And it just always made me think like there must be a body, like subtler bodies that exist. It's not the physical, because obviously I'm over here and I can think and feel. And that's kind of where my interest in that, I guess, ended up starting.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, physical matter, I mean, whether it even exists or not is irrelevant, because all we can really experience is mind anyway. Like, even if there is physical matter, like this water bottle, the only reason I know that there's this water bottle is through my mind. I see it, but that's just visual perception, and I can feel it, and that's just tactile perception. I can shake it and hear it. That's just auditory perception. So it's all just perception. It's all just mental states, sort of like George Berkeley in the 1700s, just saying, all that exists are just minds and mental states. And like Mahayana Buddhism just completely dispensed with the whole idea of physical matter, any kind of actual body other than just mental states. So I can relate to that. And
Also,
you can
too,
have
if you
all
could,
kinds of mental bodies.
or like if everything is consciousness, like when you kind of get more in that universal sense, it's like mind and consciousness, like kind of merge into one, and then it's just everything is made out of this one substance that's conscious and can hold memories or whatever it would be. I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
There is that concept. I can't remember exactly what it is. Mahayana Buddhism, like I guess like Buddha mind, or what is it, like the universal mind, too, that I think in Theravada doesn't really exist.
Yeah, that's more of a Mahayana concept, like the one mind or the Dharmakaya or something like
Yeah.
that.
What do you think about that?
Um, Early Buddhism just did not reify the absolute. They just, I mean, it's like anytime you think about the absolute, you've just wrecked it. I mean, it's not the absolute anymore. And so the Buddha pretty much just kind of danced around it, mentioned it as little as possible, because, every time you mention it, you're not even really touching it, because nothing can touch it.
Mhm.
So I have problems with that, like with regard to the people that are just vehemently insisting that there has to be a soul, and I'm trying to tell them that, like from the Vedantist point of view, your soul is just that part of you, the part of God that just happens to be inside you. It's like
Yeah.
the Atman and Brahman are the same.
Mhm.
And but in Buddhism, they don't reify it. It's like, to say that it exists is not valid. To say that it doesn't exist is not valid. Say that it does and doesn't exist is not valid. Say it neither does nor does not exist is not valid. I mean, it's just nothing you say about it is valid. So the Buddha was just really emphasizing how to become enlightened, and not even attempting to explain, what it's really like, because you can't explain what it's like.
Well, I
And
think a lot
so,
of
oh, go ahead.
I always felt like the Buddha, especially the people he was talking to. I think, when I talk to a lot of monks, they kind of believe that at the time of the Buddha, everyone was super intelligent, super evolved, and so they just got all this stuff really easily and became really enlightened. Well, my kind of view is more that it was probably like there was very few people even back then, that could comprehend any of this, and a lot of this extra stuff, or quote unquote kind of extra stuff, wasn't even able to be understood. And it wasn't so much that it's beyond human intellect, but just the level of those people that he was talking to at that time, or in general. And then also too, I think a lot of it maybe just is just not as relevant. Maybe it's more of an intellectual curiosity and less related to reaching liberation, right?
Yeah, anything that can be explained is just conventional truth, whereas ultimate truth is just off the scale. It's like with regard to the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, where he says there's like two different levels of reality. You've got the thing as it seems, and then you've got the thing in itself, like the ultimate reality of the thing. And Kant was saying that you just can't know the thing in itself. All you can know is just the phenomena of the thing as it seems. All you can know is Maya, essentially. And
Hmm.
from the Buddhist point of view, there is a way of knowing ultimate reality. It's just that you have to go beyond all the intellect and trying to figure things out and perceive things, because it can't be perceived, because once you start perceiving it, then you're just back down to the level of Maya and seeming, and you've missed the absolute.
I mean, I always felt like, a lot of this stuff was scalable, even with truth, that, you can really start to know more and more of yourself and see how that functions in the world. And then to a greater and greater degree, maybe you can draw out more and more details, because even a lot of stuff that I feel like I have a very strong level of certainty about, I think goes beyond intellectual certainty. Um, even though I think it can be easy to, fake that. Because I mean, even, I think for most people, you can't really even tell the difference between an enlightened being and a megalomaniac and someone who's just a complete narcissist, or thinks he's always right or has some whatever, it seems to be maybe,
Yeah,
you know,
or maybe in some weird cases they're both the same person.
how so?
Oh, there are a lot of people that are like claiming to be enlightened. There's what, Daniel Ingram. I don't know if you've heard of him, where he's claiming to be enlightened. He's got followers that swear up and down that he's just this phenomenal being, but at the same time, he's just in some ways he's sort of like a snake oil salesman, or sort of like a sociopathic con man or something like that. And I may have just insulted people that think he's a big deal, but there's also another one. He wrote Enlightenment, the Damnedest Thing or something. It's a book like that. I can't remember. Jed McKenna. And he may not even really exist, but I mean, this guy, I mean, he's claiming to be enlightened, and he's got some really profound philosophy. He says some really profound things, but I mean, the guy is just like an egomaniac.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's like at the phenomenal level, there a person, even a fully enlightened being, may have all these personality quirks and seeming flaws and everything. But yeah, I mean, at like a higher level, I mean, they may just be like completely in the moment and not identified with any of it. Who knows? So it's just like this mind-bending paradox, and it's just another one of those things that um, it just kind of breaks the mind if you try to think about it. It's like a Zen koan or something.
I mean, I think there is a part where it gets resolved, but it's resolved through like intuition. Like there is this higher capacity to just know instantly like what it is, and if it's just some guy acting crazy, or if it's some guy who's so present that he can, kind of break the rules in a sense. I don't know if you consider that there's a factor of like intuition like that. Say
I
that
th-
there is, or
um, I think if there is an intuition like that, it still wouldn't be like absolute. It still would be a sort of like a conventional worldly, below the highest level, below the level of, like nirvana, or, what the Hindus are calling Brahman, or the Mahayana Buddhists are calling the Dharmakaya. It would still be phenomenal. So, I mean, there can be little glimpses of enlightenment that shine through. You can talk about how like a grossly unenlightened person is just like spiritually opaque, and like a fully enlightened being would just be transparent and the light would be shining through them, where most people are somewhere in between, where they're kind of translucent with, at least a little bit of light shining through them, that
Mhm.
kind of a deal. And so if you want to call that light, um, like a symptom of that light, some sort of intuition or intuitive knowledge or something like that, then yeah, I could agree with that. Although really I'm kind of like a monist, or just a mystic that just I just have a lot of difficulty believing that you can really understand reality by thinking about it, or even through intuition, other than just through just kind of fading your mind out and just having this reality shine through.
Well, my understanding it's kind of like the lower self would become purely a like receptacle that can kind of receive, conventional like or relative information as it needs to be known from its higher self that's doing all the processing and computing in a way that would be closer to reality somehow. And then, because everything here is going to be like relative, there's kind of degrees of this, which is why I like kind of the body, the subtle body system to me, where it kind of makes sense for that
Yeah,
reason.
that's kind of like what the Hindus do. It's like they're trying to purify and purify and purify and get more and more subtle. And
Mhm.
I mean, that can just go forever. I mean, no matter how many times you sweep the floor, there's still going to be some dust remaining. You just can get purer and purer and purer and purer ad infinitum and still not get there. Whereas with Buddhism, eventually you just jump off. I mean, you just go out sideways. You just bail out of the whole system. You don't, I mean, there is no end to the path. You don't follow the path and get purer and purer and purer until finally you just reach total purity. It's just, you follow the path until finally you just have this insight that lets you just let go of the path, and you just let go of samsara, and you're just out sideways.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting because I didn't realize that distinction, that it was just kind of like you're gonna get off the path. I always thought like, it was still like you're leading to some place, that eventually as the mind would become clearer, there's more information, and there is a point of like jumping off where you switch because it's almost like you're at the pinnacle of a human being, and then like kind of like this sort of like next levels above this, and you purify that level, and then poof, you're in this whole other world, whatever that is, of the enlightened being that would then kind of transcend our own experience and understanding, like being like it's just like something else, like the Buddha and all of his experiences with all the realms and all this stuff. Like you're all of a sudden you're multidimensional, fully aware, could see everybody else's karma and what they need and yada 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 and where they're going and all this sort of thing. Um,
Yeah, although ultimately nirvana is not a realm at all. I mean, it's nowhere on the whole scale of like the 31 planes of existence. I mean, nirvana just isn't on the list. It's just completely off the scale.
mhm,
And some people have to get farther than others. I mean, some people might have to get all the way to fourth jhana before their mind becomes so subtle that they're no longer distracted by all the mental states, all of the Maya and everything, and they can you know detach. Suddenly they just stop identifying with it. Whereas other people, that first jhana might be good enough, or they might just have some near death experience or something that just slams them, where I mean they're still at a relatively crude state, but they just get slammed out sideways through whatever, some kind of crisis or something.
so this kind of leads me into like just kind of what is enlightenment then? How do you? I'm still. How do you just define enlightenment?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, it's like you can't define it really. I mean, like there's the standard, um, like in Theravada, the standard definition of enlightenment is just the end of greed, hate, and delusion. The end of
Yeah.
lobha, dosa, moha, or the end of dukkha. The end of suffering. Or you could say that it's like you're no longer creating karma. So that would be kind of a definition of enlightenment. Although
Mhm.
with me, it seems like enlightenment would just be like full knowledge of ultimate reality.
Hmm.
You're no longer identifying with any limited anything finite, that your mind is just no longer identified with this or that. And like going with like the Vedantist idea, it's just you just merge with Brahman. It's like the drop hits the ocean and just blends,
Mhm.
something like that.
Well, I think, in my view, it's like you kind of would blend in that ultimate reality, but also be, have full control of all the other realities. So you'd have the physical body as well. You can still function in that because you can be like a drop, and then you can be the ocean as well.
Yeah, but there
And
is no you.
I mean, just in a conventional sense, because obviously if it's everything, there would be no you because it's I mean, the way the linguistics work, right? So there would be nothing other than, so therefore it would just all fall off, right?
Something like that. Although really, samsara is illusory in a sense. So what happens with samsara is largely irrelevant to nirvana. I mean, again, we're just getting into the paradoxical mind warping stuff, but yeah, they really have nothing to do with each other, even though they're both simultaneous. It's like the simile I use a lot is you've just got like this uncarved block of stone, and
Mhm.
inside that uncarved block of stone is every possible statue that could possibly exist. Like every single molecule is right there in the right place already. All you got to do
Mhm.
is just kind of dismiss the rest of the stone, and like ultimate reality would just be the block of stone. Whereas some of these statues, these virtual statues, as I say, they really are in there. Every single atom is already in the right place and everything. They're so convoluted and complex that they start differentiating themselves from the rest of everything else and think that they're this distinct entity. when really all it is just one of an infinite number of possibilities that just virtually exist and don't really exist.
Well, if, I mean, I feel like mind, if everything's kind of like this stratum of mind or consciousness, that to mean something that exists would just be something that experiences is experience, and then therefore it exists. But then, I guess like, it's interesting because even in the Buddha, I mean, in the Buddha, but I think it was the Majjhima Nikaya, they even talked about like there's like, the God of this world or this realm too. And I always felt like there's kind of like these higher beings as well that within their mind kind of maintain the um, perception of an objective reality, and then based off of our own development, mentally we can either observe that directly or not, and it's distorted. And this would be more like the samsara is like the distorted version of reality that's like this kind of objective reality created from a higher being's mind. I mean, this is a little bit complex, but this is like kind of the more esoteric side, I guess, that I've also kind of gotten into. I don't know if that just seems like garbage, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's like sort of like in Hinduism, you've got Vishnu lying on the big lotus blossom, dreaming of the whole world, something like that. Or
Yeah.
like the demiurge in a lot of the Gnostic philosophies, where you've got the ultimate reality, like Plotinus. He's got the ultimate reality, which is just completely off the scale, formless, infinite, no boundaries, nothing. And then below that, you've got like the demiurge, or like Maya in Hinduism, which from which the whole world of illusion or phenomena springs forth. But that's just you're already like this quantum leap from the ultimate reality, which is just formless.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with like, 'cause, I was raised in a Kashmir Shaivite ashram, and Kashmir Shaivism gets into like what they call tattvas, which would be like different realms, and like the highest one, like the first level is like I am. So this is the existence. Like in the higher realm, there is nothing. There is no I am, and then like that's like the first thing that happens is this individuality, and then like it becomes more and more conditioned until eventually you come down to the realm of a human being. Is
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
I
although like in Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, you've got like the highest possible realm in the 31 planes of existence is one of the formless realms.
mhm,
It's just formless Brahmas. They're just pure mind. And they
mhm,
live a zillion gajillion years, and it's so subtle. It would probably correspond to like the formless jhana of the realm of neither perception nor non-perception. It's just as subtle as mental states can possibly get. But even that's not enlightenment, because enlightenment still is just completely off the scale.
mhm. Well, if
So
you're
it's not
coming,
like nirvana is the highest level, because nirvana is not a level at all. It's just completely other.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it kind of is like you have a pyramid, and then it's like, getting to the top of the pyramid, and it's like really the level beyond that is like the whole pyramid itself and what's beyond the pyramid, like
Yeah.
the whole thing in which that takes place. Because there's obviously, I mean, I still take, issue always with a lot of the more, void emptiness sort of thing where it's like, okay, well, there is like the nirvana is basically nothing. And then once you realize there's nothing and there's no whatever, then now you're liberated, which to me just like is straight nihilism almost. But it seems like a lot of even the monks believe that.
Yeah, yeah, especially a lot of intellectual Western monks who
Hmm.
have no use for mysticism. They just don't get it at all. And
Yeah.
so pretty much they just kind of paint themselves into a corner where just intellectually they have no choice but to say that nirvana really is just extinction, is you just poof out of existence.
Hmm.
But ultimately, like ultimate reality, I mean, like I already said, it's like existence doesn't apply and non-existence doesn't apply, and existence and non-existence simultaneously doesn't apply, and neither doesn't apply. It's just completely off the scale and unthinkable.
Hmm.
So that's one reason why they call it voidness, is just you cannot wrap your head around it. You can't you cannot perceive it at all. You can't slap a label onto it. You can't, I mean, you can't see it or hear it or imagine it or anything like that. And so it's just off the scale. And so you're better off just not even really attempting to deal with it, other than the Buddha is just telling people how to maximize their chances of experiencing it directly.
Okay. But the thing is, like, the key factor, I guess, is really like, okay, then, well, how do we get there to get to that place? And you were saying, like, especially with Theravada Buddhism, it's basically about purifying the mind, right? Craving and, you know, getting out of the cycle of craving and aversion.
Sufficiently, yeah, sufficiently that you can stop being distracted by all of the mental states and detach from it. Because
Uh-huh.
it's like we identify with the mental states or whatever, we cling to that and think that it's reality. And
Uh-huh.
so by through morality and renunciation and then through meditation, that you're getting more and more subtle, and so that um, it's like consciousness is like water. Just going with another simile, consciousness is like water, and the mental states, the perceptions, are like waves.
Hmm.
And most people are just stuck at the level of waves. It's like, oh, I like this wave and I don't like that wave, and this wave is good and that wave is bad, and just on and on. They're just stuck at the level of waves, and they've got no concept whatsoever of the water from which everything is made. All these waves are essentially the same water, but
Hmm.
they're stuck at this differentiating this wave from that wave, and they're just at the complete level of form and not of essence.
Hmm.
Whereas enlightenment, you'd be penetrating through the waves and you just see it all as the same water. And it
Hmm.
doesn't really matter. I mean, the waves don't go away or anything. But I mean, if you're meditating, you're trying to calm the waves as much as possible so that you're no longer identified with these waves. I mean, if there's no waves to identify with, that makes it easiest to detach from the whole phenomenal system of forms and shapes and appearances and everything.
Hmm. I think it's a good segue into the meditation, which I kind of wanted to get into because, like, on one of your podcasts before, you said that you were never a good meditator, but that you've always believed that there isn't. But like personally, I've always believed that there isn't such a thing as a good meditator. Just people who haven't put in the hours. I mean, those who have put in the hours and those who haven't. And I know one of the reasons that you say that you're not a good meditator is because you have a very active mind, and you talk about that. But
Yeah.
that always kind of just seemed to me that wouldn't meditation be like the thing for you? It's like if you have a very active mind and meditation, the goal is calming the mind, then isn't shouldn't be that be the thing you devote all your efforts to?
It can be, and I did for many years, where I was just grinding away, and it can be very frustrating. It's like if you just have like a hyperactive mind, then sometimes meditating, it's like trying to balance a marble on the tip of a sharpened pencil. It's just it falls away and falls away and falls away, and or like there's a sutta. Um, oh, I think it's in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Godika Sutta, where there's this monk named Godika, and he gets jhana and falls away and gets it and falls away and gets it and falls away till finally he just gets so frustrated that he commits suicide. While he's got jhana, because if you die with jhana, you're guaranteed of a Brahma realm, whereas if you die
uh,
without jhana, there's no guarantee. So he waited until he got jhana one more time and then cut his throat. And then
oh wow.
he actually became enlightened while he was bleeding out, while he was
Oh,
dying. But
that sounds
yeah, some
pretty
people
profound,
like
actually.
some Burmese villagers, they just don't think much. They just live a
Mhm.
very simple, peaceful kind of a life, very uncomplicated, and maybe they just don't think much anyway. And they can just go to a meditation retreat and just sit down, and they're just like a block of stone, like a statue, just right off the bat.
I can
Whereas,
attest to that.
yeah, and a lot of Westerners, it's like it's really hard work,
Yeah.
and just having to go back to the ABCs again and again and again can be very frustrating. And so I have attained some relatively advanced or subtle meditation states, but it took a hell of a lot of work. And in some ways, I've thought many times that in some ways, like psychedelic drugs would be preferable, just because you're guaranteed of a result.
Mhm.
You take the pill or whatever, and you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen, whereas with meditation you can strive for years and
Mhm.
still not reach the same kind of state that you get from 500 micrograms of good acid.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
it's really it's really like it depends on your karma, a lot of it, or your paramis, like the Burmese talk about a lot, where um, if you've just got like a really strong like a karmic momentum going, then yeah, trying to tame that. You can do it temporarily, but trying to keep it that way it can be like a Herculean effort.
well, I'm assuming there's a reason you don't just do acid all day long and hopped up on
Oh yeah.
mushrooms, unless you are, and I don't know.
No, no.
So why do you do it then? I mean, if it's really like, okay, well, I can take, this amount and I can have these experiences, why haven't you gone that route?
Well, I've already experienced it. It's like I've already done where I've already gone where that can get you,
And what did you
essentially.
learn then?
Well, I mean, early on, just taking like a drug like LSD, um, it was valuable, and I think most monks of around approximately my age probably have taken like psychedelic drugs before they became monks, just because first of all it gives you the insight that there's more than one way of looking at reality, that the ordinary normie way of seeing the world isn't the only possible way, and it's not even necessarily the best possible way, that there are, deeper alternative ways of looking at reality that um, that are preferable in certain respects. They get you closer to reality. And
Mm.
so then generally the person is trying to, or the meditator takes up meditation as a way of trying to cultivate these better, or a better level of consciousness, or a higher level of consciousness, without having to take the drug, without having to use the chemical.
I mean, what's the advantage of being able to do without the drug, though, at the end of the day?
Well, the drug is
What devil's advocate,
temporary.
by the way?
Yeah, well, the
No,
drug is just, it's just temporary.
yeah,
It's like, um, I can't remember what Swami it was. He says, LSD allows you to see God, but you only get to visit, and then you got to come back again. So
mhm.
what you're trying to do is you're trying to get into like essentially endless, just no beginning and no end kind of a state. Whereas like getting high or even good meditation has a beginning and an end.
Well, the thing for me is I always, when it comes to the meditation, the states, I mean, I've seen the same thing where there's some people that can meditate for hours and hours, and being around a lot of meditators, a lot of them don't necessarily have any attainment, or even they still have the same issues, and year after year they're the same, and they'll sit
Yeah.
down like, oh yeah, I had such a great time. Meditating was so wonderful, it's so enjoyable, and I'm just thinking, man, you must like it seems to me that pretty much all the spiritual work is like shadow work. It's all the dark stuff and getting in there with all the things that you struggle with, and that's where all the progress is made. And that all this other just feeling good and sitting just seems to be like useless. It's just like more phenomenon that is pleasurable, and it's there for some time and it leaves, but it doesn't really lead to this further purification of mind that allows you to reach enlightenment. I don't know what your take on that is.
Yeah, there's different kinds of people, different kinds of temperaments. And yeah, some people, they can just sit like a statue for 3 hours in the full lotus, and then when they get up, they're just as messed up as they were before. It's some people, meditation really all it does is just make them good meditators.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really have much of an effect on the rest of their life, because they just compartmentalize. Some people are like this, where their mind is just divided up into different compartments, and they don't
Mhm.
have much intercommunication. So when they meditate, they just go into meditation mode, and they're just like in the meditation compartment, and it doesn't really have much effect on any other part of their mind. And then when they go back into just walking around and making noise, it has almost no effect. But with me, my whole mind is pretty well integrated, and that's one reason why it's so hard to meditate. Is I don't have these compartments where I just can just, all I have to do is just still and silence just one compartment. I've got to still and silence the whole mind,
Mhm.
because my mind just isn't divided up into these kind of compartments. And so I've compared meditation to digging a basement before, where there's different ways you can dig the basement. You can just dig it all the way down in one place and then widen it out, or you can just dig it in layers, just gradually, till you get down to the bottom of it. Or another example was, my father used to breed cocker spaniels
Mhm.
professionally. He had a kennel a long time ago, before I was born. And back then they didn't have a white cocker spaniel yet. So anyone who could breed a white cocker spaniel is going to get rich, or at least he's going to make his name in the cocker spaniel breeding world or whatever. So my father figured there's two different ways of going about it. You can take a spotted cocker spaniel and just keep breeding dogs with smaller and smaller spots until they're gone, or you just take like a cream colored cocker spaniel and just get paler and paler ones until you get down to white.
Mhm.
And um, it's sort of like meditation, where like if your mind is compartmentalized, you just get really good at meditation, like samatha meditation, and then you can try to expand that out to the rest of your mind. But with me, it's like I've got to go down one level at a time and just got to bring my whole mind down with me. You know, it's like I don't have the compartments, and so um, it makes it more difficult. But a person who does who doesn't compartmentalize their mind, and like a lot of new age people, they've just got really compartmentalized minds where they can one part of their mind believes something that's the exact opposite of what this other part of their mind believes.
Hmm.
Or you can have some people that are very religious when they're in religious mode, but then, you know, they're like habitual liars or crooks or something, you know, when they're not being religious. You know, I met quite a few Burmese people who were like that, where they're very devout. You know, they just almost go into like a trance state when they're, you know, they're chanting their chants or whatever. But then, you know, at the rest of the time they're like lying like a little kid. They don't even need a reason to lie. They'll just lie just out of habit or something.
Well, that's
So
why I think like that ability to like focus also too. I mean, there seems to be like a spiritual focus. You know, I mean, I have to think about, I guess, the compartmentalization, because I guess I never thought of it as so much as there being parts, as you know, that it really has to do more with how to say, the spiritual, how spiritually advanced you are to a degree. Because I think that if you're more spiritually advanced, you'd be aware of more things because your awareness would be expanded. And that as your, you know, awareness expands, therefore when you sit, it would actually become more and more difficult in a way. And that, you know, a lot of these people awareness is very small, and it's not so much that there's all these different compartments, but that just like the awareness or the light that they're using is very, very small, versus maybe a bigger one, so therefore it's more difficult. I don't know, is that kind of the, am I
yeah,
saying the same thing, or?
I think one of the purposes of meditation is it's bringing a lot of the subconscious mind up into consciousness. Like a person who's really good at mindfulness meditation, a lot of their conscious mind is going to be subconscious in the average person. It's just you know, what would be below the surface for most people would be, you know, within the realm of conscious perception for a person who meditates a lot and is good at it, especially if it's like a mindfulness kind of meditation and not just going into a trance state.
Hmm, right on. Trying to think if there's anything else. You know, I was thinking actually, because I feel like we have a lot of good information that's all kind of mostly not too controversial and about Buddhism, maybe of just ending it here and kind of having this one be, you know, not as spicy as maybe some of the other ones. And then next time we can kind of get into maybe some more spicy stuff. Uh,
Yes, it's your call, man. It's your show.
yeah, I think let's do that. And then we'll do another one hopefully sometime soon, and we can get into all the more spicy things for the people who like some spice on their Buddhism.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can get banned in a different one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much, Venerable Panavasa.
Yeah, you're
You know,
welcome.
I really appreciate it. You know, you're really one of the few people that I've found that we can have these types of conversations, because I just find that so many people just haven't thought about it, or don't have the experience, or whatever it is, and you just got like this amazing combination. So kudos to you, and thank you once again for coming on the show.
Yeah, I was glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, have a good night. Peace.